What's up, folks? What's going on? Welcome to the Spun Today podcast, the only podcast that is anchored in writing, but unlimited in scope. I'm your host, Tony Ortiz, and I appreciate you listening. This is episode 276 of the Spun Today podcast, and it's the final episode of the year, the final episode of 2024. In this episode, I'll break down watching Beetlejuice, or Beetlejuice 2 for the uninitiated, Tom Papa's latest comedy special, Home Free, as well as an honorable mention of a few other comedy specials. Stick around to find out which those are. And last but certainly not least, a new addition to your favorite segment and mine, Goats Doing Goat Shit. Stick around to find out who made the list in this final episode of the year. I want to thank, as always, each and every one of you who take the time to listen, who have been listening throughout the year. This year has been filled with ups and downs, and unfortunately more downs than ups, at least on my side of things. If you and yours have had a similar year, definitely looking forward to 2025 turning things around for us all. I'm definitely optimistically looking toward next year and beyond, but I'll definitely expound on that during the next episode / first episode of 2025 when I do the 2024 or prior year look back and reflection on goals that were met, that were not met, and establish some for the following year. So definitely stick around, or look out rather, for that episode in a couple weeks. And without further ado, here are a few ways that you can help support this podcast if you so choose. Your support means a ton and is much appreciated. There's a bunch of different ways that you can help support, whether it be by using affiliate links to get discounts on things that you may already be shopping for, all of which you can find at spuntoday.com/support, or whether it's purchasing some merch, some of my books, so on and so forth. But here is one of those ways you can help support, and then we will jump right into the episode. You can help support the Spun Today podcast by shopping my merch section. Go to spuntoday.com/support and navigate to the merch section. Here you'll find the iconic Podcast vs. Anybody tee, which comes in many different color schemes and all different sizes. There are a bunch of other designs available as well, including writing themed shirts, cycling shirts, and the classic Dominican escudo, and much, much more. And if t-shirts aren't your thing, all designs also come in pullover hoodies, zip-up hoodies, sweatshirts, and tank tops. You can also shop the Spun Today coffee mugs, which has the Spun Today logo on one side and the tagline that I end every episode with on the other, which is start taking steps in the general direction of your dreams. Once again, for all Spun Today merch, go to spuntoday.com/support and navigate to the merch section. Beetlejuice, aka Beetlejuice 2, was released in 2024 and is the sequel to Beetlejuice, the original film, from 1988. So decades later. And I personally thought it was a great watch. It's definitely one of those sequels that does not disappoint. You know, as of late, as of the past few years, there's been a lot of remakes and reboots and things of that nature. Some of which hit, a lot of which missed. I've spoken about some that I enjoyed here on the podcast in the past. And this one I thought was dope because it was most, if not all, of the main characters and from the first movie. And it was where are they now? All these years later, you know, they didn't CGI it and keep them all young, or, you know, try to do a storyline that was not consistent with the actual timeline of how much time has passed between this sequel and the first film. And it was a cool movie in and of itself. But here is the official synopsis. After a family tragedy, 3 generations of the Dietz family return home to Winter River. Still haunted by Beetlejuice, Lydia's life is turned upside down when her teenage daughter, Astrid, accidentally opens the portal to the afterlife. And as we like to do here on the Spun Today podcast, because if we don't, who will? Let's shout out the writers. Beetlejuice is based on characters created by Michael McDowell and Larry Wilson. The story is by Alfred Goh, Miles Millar, and Seth Graham Smith. And the screenplay is by Alfred Goh and Miles Millar. Shout out to each and every one of those writers that put this film together and got it from the pen to paper, text to script, and allowed it to become what it became when the iconic Tim Burton directed this shit out of it. So the movie, if you're a fan of the first one, it definitely checks off all the nostalgia boxes. Again, you have all the main characters coming back. Michael Keaton playing Beetlejuice, Winona Ryder playing Lydia Dietz, Catherine O'Hara playing Delia Dietz. You have a great addition in Jenna Ortega playing Astrid Dietz, which is the daughter of Lydia. And we enter the world with all of them, grown and older. Astrid's character is very similar to Lydia's character in the first film, like the misunderstood goth-ish teenager. So you see that dynamic replaying itself, consistent with the first film. And then you have the relationship between Lydia and Delia being in a bit of a better place than the contentious, stepmother type. I don't remember if she was her stepmother or adopted mother, but the contentious type of relationship that they had growing up. And Delia, who was an artist, she used to do sculptures and I think paintings and stuff as well, but definitely sculptures, like these weird tacky ones in the first film, becomes this world-renowned artist. She's big time now. Delia has her own television show. She still sees ghosts and is able to see folks from the afterlife. So she has this Miss Cleo type of, speak to the dead or help your audience members, speak to their past relatives and stuff like that. She has that type of show going on, which the daughter is completely embarrassed about and thinks she's full of shit, essentially. And then the father from the first film is noticeably not around in the picture, and they address it fairly early on, and you find that they killed the shit out of his pedophile ass in fucking claymation. So if you don't know the backstory behind it, the father from the first film, which is played by an actor named Jeffrey Jones, was one of the main characters in the first film. He's the principal in Ferris Bueller's Day Off, if you're familiar with that. He, back in 2002, 2004, pleaded no contest and was found guilty of being in the possession of child pornography. He also allegedly, I don't want to get sued, paid a 14 or 13 or 15-year-old boy to pose for nude and lewd pictures. And, he's a registered sex offender. He's pretty much obviously fell out of the Hollywood scene thereafter. Then in a couple years later, moved to a different state, either Florida or California, quote unquote, forgot to register as a sex offender. So after being on 5 years of probation, I think is what he got, wound up also being sentenced to community service after that infraction, and then moved again to either California or Florida, I forget the order of it, a few years later, and quote unquote forgot again to register as a sex offender, so on and so forth. So that being said, in the movie, they kill him off. He was literally one of the main characters of the first one. They couldn't just not reference him, from a story perspective. But it was pretty funny how they did it, I thought. So they made it that he was on an airplane as Delia, the mom, is telling the story to her daughter of how he died. She says that, he was on a plane. He was going to go, bird watching, some safari or something like that. The plane crashes and Lydia's like, oh my God, he died in a plane crash. And then the mom is like, no, actually he didn't. He survived the plane crash somehow and was floating along on a piece of luggage after almost drowning. And then there was this big explosion and he got, super hurt in the explosion. And she was, oh my God, he died, he burned to death. And then the mom was like, no, he still didn't die. Then he was almost going to shore or to safety or something like that. And then a shark came out of the water and just bit half his body off. And then that's how he dies. So they fucking killed him 3 times. And while she's telling the daughter the story, the way they did it in the film was that she's describing everything that happened to the daughter, and they're showing it visually, but in claymation form, which was an interesting Tim Burton touch to the whole thing. So going back to the dynamic between Astrid and Lydia, which again is very similar to the dynamic between Lydia and Delia in the first movie. She's a rebellious teen, wants distance from her mom, thinks she's full of shit and kind of a grifter in terms of speaking to the dead and the TV show that she has. She doesn't like that fame, and is dealing with the loss of her dad, who died after her parents had gotten divorced, I believe. So she kind of resents her mom a little bit for that as well. And they all come back to the hometown where, the original movie takes place for the funeral and arrangements and stuff like that. She doesn't want to be there. Winds riding her bike and getting into an accident. The brakes don't work, crashes into a tree type of thing. And this kid named Jeremy, played by Arthur Conti, helps her out, befriends her, invites her over for Halloween so they can, give candy to the kids together, and they pretty much hit it off. So now all of a sudden has this pseudo love interest / friend, and now she does want to stay in the town. She wants to hang out with this guy. Her mom begrudgingly gives her permission to do so, to hang out with him. She finds out from a realtor that she's speaking to in the area that her daughter went to hang out with a boy that she met on XYZ street. She says the name of the street. I forget what it is. And the realtor's like, oh, I hope it's not anywhere near that house where that horrible incident happened. I had it on the market for years and nobody's ever been willing to purchase it. And she's like, what house? She's like, oh, you don't know the story of so-and-so? This kid essentially murdered both his parents and then wound up falling out of a tree and breaking his own neck or some wild shit like that. And then Lydia's, wait, what's the address to the house? Because she had previously dropped her daughter off at the house to hang out with the boy. And of course, same address. So she rushes over there, but is essentially too late. By this point, Astrid realizes that Jeremy is a ghost. He comes clean to her and lies to her though. He comes clean about being a ghost and that he found this book that, if he goes with her to the afterlife, she can help him get his soul back. And he gave her this sob story of what happened to his family, which is obviously not the real story, but essentially so that she would agree to go with him into the afterlife to do him this favor. And she agrees because she likes the guy. She's also having the mental, dilemma / realization of, oh shit, my mom was telling the truth. She can't see dead people because now I can too. But Lydia gets there. The kid, takes her into the afterlife. There's a spell that they do and, draw the door on the wall and go through. But the real way for the kid to get a soul back and, become living again would be to take her soul, Astrid's soul. So that's what he essentially is trying to do under the guise of, she's just going to help him type of thing. And the rest of the movie from there on out is pretty much Winona Ryder following them into the afterlife, invoking Beetlejuice, having to get him to help her go into the afterlife to get her daughter back and to prevent this whole soul swapping thing from happening. Michael Keaton, of course, steals the show as he does in the first movie. He's great throughout. There's also a dope character called Dolores, played by Monica Bellucci. She plays Beetlejuice's wife that was chopped up into a bunch of different pieces by Beetlejuice because she was a soul, literally a soul-sucking monster. Beetlejuice married her once upon a time, and then she just wanted to take his soul. He winds up killing her and chopping her up, but keeping her body separate so she can never come back together. But she gets loose somehow and staples herself back together in this really cool scene where her body parts are literally coming back together and she's using a staple gun to staple herself. And then she just wants to find Beetlejuice to get her revenge. So he's dealing with that while also trying to help Lydia get her daughter back and running his whole, afterlife services. And he has Bob, the guy with the shrunken head. He had a ton of those working for him in this afterlife office setting. They show at the end that Bob dies, R.I.P. Bob. He lived from the year 1372 to 2024 and dies at the hand of actually Dolores, the soul sucker. Danny DeVito is in it. He plays the janitor. He's in it for a few minutes. Also dies at the hand of this soul sucking lady. Willem Dafoe is in it. Does a great job. And it was just a dope watch. I definitely recommend it. especially if you were into the first movie. It's a no-brainer. You'll love this one as well. Beetlejuice, streaming now on HBO Max. Tom Papa's latest comedy special, Home Free, was released in 2024. Tom Papa, I've broken down prior specials of his, at least one, probably 2 or 3 in the past. He's a hilarious comedian, apparently a great baker. I got into his YouTube bread baking show that he was doing during the pandemic. Does these sourdough breads and super nerdy into that world, which is pretty cool. He is a clean-ish comic, I want to say. I've heard him curse before, so I wouldn't say he's as clean as a Seinfeld or a Nate Bargatze, which are hilarious comics that I also love. So I'm definitely not saying that as a pejorative. It's a clean comic. I just see it as a different style of delivering laughs, just as effective as any other style of comedy. But his latest special, Home Free, which is available on Netflix, did not disappoint. Here are a few of the bits or jokes or lines of writing that resonated with me. And, he's a family man, married, 2 daughters, I want to say, maybe 3. I think 2. Has a bunch of pets, and his comedy is themed around that lifestyle. And the whole home free concept ties to the fact that he and his wife are now empty nesters. I think his last kid just went off to college. So a lot of what this special is about is around that. And he says in it that he dropped his youngest at college and that nobody tells you how hard it's going to be to pretend to be sad. This other one I jotted down, but I do not remember the joke too well. I wrote down that he said something to the effect of driving at night and mistaking garbage cans for people. I think being paranoid, being high or drunk or something like that. He said that as a dad, you have to pretend to be Superman. You can't just cry, and then when your kids ask you what's wrong, say everything. I can't figure this out. He spoke about inner dialogue that you have as a dad, as an adult, and that your brain holds on to insults and just plays them over and over in a loop in your head. And you just tell yourself things like, I'm not going to get that promotion. I'm not going to get a pay raise this year. Everyone knows I smell like ham. He just slipped that in. I thought it was hilarious. This one definitely hit close to home. He goes, you wake up early every morning, you start making breakfast for your kids. It's still dark. You're tired, you drive them to school, and then you go back to pick them up 20 minutes later. At least that's how it feels like. And then you take them to all these activities, like you're some sort of Uber driver, and you're taking them to all these activities that they can't even do. I just love the inflection of his voice and how he repeats the last couple words and sometimes sentence of what he says often. And you kind of get in, he lulls you into the cadence of how he talks. Definitely an enjoyable comic to watch. But yeah, those were just a few of my takeaways from watching his special. I definitely recommend it. Tom Papa's latest comedy special, Home Free, streaming now on Netflix. I saw a few other comedy specials recently, a few honorable mentions that I wanted to shout out, starting with Anthony Jeselnik's latest, Bones and All. Anthony Jeselnik is the king of misdirect. You usually don't know where he's going. He takes sharp left turns in delivering his comedy. You think he's speaking about one thing, he flips it on his head, and then it's usually something just provocative and holy shit, I didn't see that coming. Really funny comic. And I enjoy his comedy. Even with the shots fired at Rogan, not so much, but Rogan, other comedians within Rogan's immediate orbit that he spoke about, actually on Tom Papa's podcast, as well as on this special. But he has a couple funny bits I wanted to mention here. He's speaking to sibling rivalry, and he says that his brother, when they were little, he let his dog run away. So for retribution for that, he poisoned his fish. And he said that he won in the end because he got his dog back, but his brother died from the salmon. He said a friend of his started talking about premature ejaculation and erectile dysfunction and things like that, and he advised his friend to start talking about baseball. And his friend was like, don't you mean start thinking about baseball? And he replied, I don't give a shit what you think about. Just don't talk to me about premature ejaculation. Then the last one I'll share is he said that he stopped listening to Kanye when Kanye went Christian, and that his manager used to keep him up on things that Kanye would say, and when he was in the news all the time. And his manager told him that Kanye started wearing White Lives Matter t-shirts and saying anti-Semitic things. And Anthony Jeselnik's response was, oh, so he went super Christian. And that is an honorable mention to Anthony Jeselnik's latest special, Bones and All, streaming now on Netflix. The next honorable mention comedy special that I wanted to speak to is Jamie Foxx's What Had Happened Was, also available on Netflix. Jamie Foxx, for those who don't know, is like a triple, quadruple threat. He's a hilarious comedic actor and dramatic actor. So he can act his ass off. He can sing. He plays instruments. He does stand up. Super, super talented dude. I always compare him in terms of just being multifaceted, hyphenate, as they say, to John Leguizamo. I feel has skills that as well. When it comes to, I guess, within the comedic and able to play dramatic roles as well, the one-man shows that he does, and things like that. Never heard him sing or play instruments or anything like that, but yeah, Jamie's the fucking man. And he went through a big medical scare about a year or two ago, where people thought that he died, people thought that he was about to die, that he's going to die. And this was the first time that he was going to speak to it publicly, this special, so it was very much anticipated because of that. And also, it's Jamie Foxx. I feel nobody has ever had a bad thing to say about Jamie Foxx. One of those celebrities that everybody reveres and nobody has shit to talk about. And it was a super emotional special. He had one of his daughters bring him out. He had another of his daughters who plays the guitar and sings come on stage and do a song with him. He detailed what happened the day that he got sick, and it was super emotional. He was in Atlanta. He had a really bad headache, and he asked for aspirin or Advil or something. And before he was able to even take it, he just blacked out. Then he wakes up. It's like days later. He can't walk, and essentially he had a stroke. And in the special, which is not just like straight stand-up comedy, he walks you through that journey while sprinkling in jokes, while being super emotional, him crying, the crowd crying, what folks watching at home crying, getting all choked up. I'm not crying, you're crying. He recorded the special in Atlanta, which is where it happened. And he has this ability to bring you into the moment. He has so much charisma. You get drawn into the story. He sprinkles jokes throughout the whole thing. He has this family moment on stage, and it's somehow very intimate while being completely, out in the open for the audience to see. And flexes all of his dramatic and comedic talents through characters that he's played, like Willie Beeman, Ray Charles, and he embodies those characters to tell parts of the story. And it's so ill. It's not, again, just traditional straight stand-up, but it's a dope experience. Definitely worth the watch, especially to support Jamie Foxx. That's my honorable mention for Jamie Foxx's What Had Happened Was, streaming now on Netflix. Last but certainly not least, in my honorable mentions section of recent stand-up comedy specials that I saw, Single Lady. Ali Wong, who I think, I've definitely broken down her specials in the past, but I think that she is the pioneer of filming comedy specials while pregnant. She did it with her first daughter and her second. Really funny comic. Recently got divorced. She was married and pregnant throughout her other specials. And this is the first special that she filmed post-divorce. And she's a raunchy, funny, definitely worth the watch comedian. And if you haven't followed her comedic career thus far, you're kind of invested in what happened. Why'd they get divorced? She was like, spoke so highly of her ex, and he made his way into her comedy specials, and how, he's this big finance guy, but somehow she's the rich one and wound up paying for his student loans. So she feels that she got fucked over in that sense. She's said stuff like that in the past. But now they actually divorced. You know, those were all jokes. But a couple things that she mentioned that I thought were hilarious were that she has a divorced mom energy. And all she wants is to just get dick down. And she doesn't care if you pronounce hors d'oeuvres as horde devourers. And she said she feels that her heart is like Swiss cheese and that she needs different sized bespoke dicks to fill all those holes. And another one that she said that I thought was hilarious is that she trims her daughter's hairs every single day. And she said that they're like her little they are like her little bonsais. And I thought that was hilarious. And that is my little honorable mention of Ali Wong's Single Lady, her latest comedy special streaming now on Netflix. Goats doing goat shit. This is the segment of the Spun Today podcast, your favorite and mine, where I like to highlight goats within their respective areas that go above and beyond and do something dope, do something honorable, that I like to credit here in the Goats Doing Goat Shit segment. Things that they don't have to do, but decide to. This episode's inductee and the final inductee of 2024 to the Goats Doing Goat Shit list, none other than Mr. Beast, aka Jimmy Donaldson. For those that don't know, Mr. Beast is the largest YouTuber on the planet. He also has this, he's gone viral, you know, tons and tons and tons of times. Again, biggest YouTuber in the world. And he does things, create his own games, which he actually has a dope one on Prime Video as of late that I just saw a couple episodes of. I think they're streaming one episode every week or every few days or something like that. And it's broken a bunch of Guinness World Records for most contestants on a game show. He had 1,000. Most cameras on a game show, over 1,000. He built a city to host these games, literally built from the ground up, and just a ton of records and stuff like that. But that's a huge skill thing that he's doing. But he's done things. He gives away like $250,000 all the time, $1 million, holds a sign on the side of the road that says house for sale, $1, and people that actually stop, you know, actually sold them the house for $1 after buying it. Does a bunch of games, you know, there's a huge circle in the middle of a field and, you know, 50 people be in it. The last one to leave the circle gets $1 million. Like weird, crazy, interesting videos like that just grab your attention. But he has this philanthropic arm that I've highlighted in the past, definitely on my newsletter in the video of the week section, which folks can subscribe to absolutely for free at spuntoday.com/subscribe, where he's done things like built 100 water wells in Africa, paid for LASIK surgery for like 1,000 people that otherwise were blind. And I'm sorry, not LASIK surgery, cataract surgery, that, you know, people that were blind, they just couldn't afford the surgery for it. He gave them their sight back, and just really cool, dope things like that. But the reason why I'm adding him to the Goats Doing Goat Shit segment today is because of the play against, for lack of a better choice of word, against big chocolate, quote unquote. So he has this company called Feastables, which makes chocolate bars, which are actually pretty good. And the whole idea is that, you know, candy bars don't have to be, you know, chock full of bullshit and chemicals and stuff like that. You can make them with just a minimal number of ingredients. His, I believe, just have chocolate and sugar and like sea salt, and then whatever else, you know, if it has peanut butter or peanuts or almonds or whatever. You know, it doesn't have yellow number 5 and xanthan gum and this and that and the other, and a list of a shitload of ingredients. But it's a small company, right, that he has been scaling. It's called Feastables. And he was getting the cocoa for his chocolate from a sustainable, ethical source, sustainable farms, you know, family-owned farms in Peru. But he said that 70% of the world's cocoa comes from West Africa. That's where all the big players get their chocolate, because they're such huge companies. They need tons and tons and just a very large supply of chocolate. His beef with that is that 46% of the labor of that source of cocoa in the world, so 70% of all the cocoa in the world comes from West Africa, from two countries, Cote d'Ivoire and Ghana. And of that 70% source of chocolate, 46% of them, so almost half of them, all employ child labor. And he said that he knew he would have to move the operations for Feastables, his supply chain rather, for Feastables over to West Africa because it would outgrow what Peru was able to supply. And that, the sustainable chocolate source that he was getting from Peru, he can't really say to the big chocolate players, you should source your chocolate sustainably and not employ child labor because look, we can do it. He said that wouldn't be a good argument because from their perspective, they'll just say, oh, you don't know how it works. You're too small. That's good for you, but not sustainable for us. We can't do that at this level. Now, what he's found is that a big reason that there is child labor is because the farms don't make enough money to be able to afford to hire adults. But there's this thing called the living income reference price scale, where it breaks down that if a farmer sells you a metric ton of beans, if they don't get paid X, then they won't be able to make a living wage, which essentially forces them to turn to child labor in order to survive. Now, what Feastables is doing is using that metric and guaranteeing farmers that price, contingent on no child labor. So he said, theoretically, if they sell it to him for less, Feastables will pay them a premium on top of what they sell it to them for and say, no, this is what you need to actually live, etc. And, break it all down for them. They also have farm coaches that are helping them get more yield out of their farm. So he says 5 to 10% more yield out of the hectares that they have, and getting them supplies, etc., and teaching them how to make more out of what they have. And, he went out there himself, spent a week on working the farms, figuring out how to do the ethical sourcing thing the right way. And his long-term goal, which is why, again, I'm adding him to the Goats Doing Goat Shit segment, is that he hopes to prove the concept once Feastables does scale up to the levels of Big Chocolate, that Big Chocolate can also be ethically sourced, aka no child labor, and profitable. It doesn't have to be either or. And then he can use that proof of concept as well as his, huge platform to essentially bully Big Chocolate into following suit. And he said, there are currently over 1 million kids in child labor in cocoa farms in that area. And obviously he can't get all 1 million of the kids out, but he says if he can put a dent into a couple thousand and then with his influence get one or some of those big chocolate companies to follow suit or do the same, it can lead to tens of thousands of kids or 100,000s of kids not having to be working in cocoa farms in West Africa. And for that, I'm officially inducting Mr. Beast, aka Jimmy Donaldson, into the Spun Today Goats Doing Goat Shit list. Good on you, sir, and welcome to the club. And that, folks, was episode 276 of the Spun Today podcast. Thank you once again for each and every one of you who take the time to listen. I really do appreciate it. And like I said in the beginning of the show, this year has had a lot of ups and downs, more downs than ups for some of us. But try and keep an optimistic outlook, stay positive, and let's all aim toward a 2025 that is filled with much more ups than downs. And let's work towards making that happen, not just wish for it. I wish you and yours happy and healthy holiday season. Peace out to 2024, and I will check you guys out in the new year. Peace. What's up, folks? Tony here. I hope you're enjoying the Spun Today podcast as much as I enjoy producing it for you. Here are a few ways you can help support the show. You can support the Spun Today podcast financially by going to spuntoday.com/support. There you will find a couple different ways that you can do just that, some of which will actually not even cost you a dime, such as using my Amazon affiliate link. When you go to spuntoday.com/support, you'll see my affiliate link to Amazon. Click on it and it will take you to Amazon's website, where you can do your shopping like normal. This will not cost you anything extra, but Amazon will pay me for driving traffic to their website. If you'd like to support the podcast more directly, you can do so by becoming a patron. at spuntoday.com/support. You'll also find my Patreon link. This is where creators such as myself can be paid directly by patrons like you. You can either make a one-time donation or schedule recurring donations if you so choose. There are also different tiers of support, and depending on which you decide to go with, you'll also receive some perks in return, such as early access to content, free digital copies of my books, free bookmarks, etc. That is, again, by supporting via my Patreon link, available at spuntoday.com/support. Similar to Patreon, at that same location, you'll also find my Ko-fi link as well as my Buy Me a Coffee link. They work very similar to Patreon and are different ways that you can help support the show financially. And last but certainly not least, you have the good old-fashioned PayPal donation button. Any which way that you choose to support is greatly appreciated. It all helps me do more of what I love, which is writing and podcasting. Again, go to spuntoday.com/support. You can also support the Spun Today podcast by rating and reviewing the show wherever it is that you're listening to this episode. I'd really appreciate it because it really does help. Also, follow me on all socials. At Spun Today on X, formerly known as Twitter. At Spun Today on Instagram. And at Spun Today on YouTube, where you'll not only find full-length episodes of the podcast, but also chopped up clips and additional content. And of course, you can follow the Facebook page at facebook.com/Spun Today. Another way you can help support the Spun Today podcast and also upgrade that stale wardrobe of yours is by going to spuntoday.com/support and clicking on the banner for Stitch Fix. Once you do, you'll enjoy a $25 discount to your first purchase. And the way Stitch Fix works is pretty cool. I use it and I've never been disappointed. You'll set up a profile. You'll put in all the sizes for your clothes, as well as all the different brands and types of clothes that you like to wear. It's really simple and intuitive to set up. They'll show you pictures and pretty much give you a thumbs up or thumbs down option on if you would wear something or not. And you get to select all the brands that you already are used to wearing. With this information, there are thousands of passionate, trend-setting stylists will curate a Stitch Fix box for you. They'll send you 5 items that you get to preview before they mail it to you, and you'll get to select based on the image if you like it or not. If not, they'll replace it with something else, and if so, they'll mail it to you absolutely for free. You can try everything on, and you have a few days to send everything back or keep the stuff that you want to keep. Then you can use that $25 credit that I mentioned towards your purchase of those items. Again, to freshen up your wardrobe and also support the Spun Today podcast, go to spuntoday.com/support and click on my affiliate link banner for Stitch Fix and enjoy your $25 credit. Do you want to start your own podcast? Have a great show idea that you want to get out into the masses but don't know quite how to get it from your head out into the world? Well, here's how. Use the podcast host Libsyn. That's who I use to bring the Spun Today podcast to you. And now you can use them the same way. Using the promo code SPUN, S-P-U-N, you can open up your Libsyn account today and get 2 months of free podcast hosting. Here's how it works. Once you record your show, you upload it to your Libsyn account, where you can fill in your episode notes, upload your podcast art, and schedule when you want your episodes to release. Once you do that, Libsyn will take care of the rest. They'll distribute your show to Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, and all the other podcatchers that you choose, instantaneously and seamlessly. Again, go to libsyn.com and use the promo code SPUN, S-P-U-N, to get 2 months free. Or use the affiliate link that's in the episode notes. Again, that's libsyn.com, promo code SPUN. Take that great podcast idea from out of your head and put it out into the world. And as always, folks, substitute the mysticism with hard work and start taking steps in the general direction of your dreams. Thanks for listening. I love you, Aiden.
I love you, Daddy.
I love you, Grayson.
I love you, Daddy.